оптимистическому сценарию.
Followed a less than optimistic scenario. However, we could not agree with those who say that there was a sudden collapse of the world order. Rather, the recent developments have corroborated our warnings about deep systemic issues in European security and international relations at large. Let me remind you of the speech by President Putin made here 8 years ago. The construct of stability based on United Nations Charter and the Helsinki Principles have been undermined by the United States and their allies in Yugoslavia, in Iraq, in Libya. It was undermined by NATO's enlargement to the east, by new divided lines. The common European home was not built because our Western partners were not guided by interest to build a common security architecture, but by illusions, dreams to be winners in the Cold War. The commitments made as part of OSCE and NRS, commitments to consider each other's securities, were ignored. The missile defense is proof of destructive moves and disregard of other states' interests. Our proposals on missile defense were rejected. Instead, we were recommended to join the American global missile defense system under Washington scenarios, which entails real risks for Russian nuclear deterrence forces. Any actions undermining strategic stability entails countermeasures, thereby long-term damage is
of international conventions and treaties in the area of security, where missile defense plays a key role. We don't even understand what is the reason behind this obsession of the U.S. to create a global missile defense system. What is it? Achieving global domination, global superiority. In any way, in the Euro-Atlantic region, we now have a strong irritant, and it will take a long time for us to get rid of it. But we are ready to do that. Another destabilizing factor is the step by the United States and other NATO members, their decision not to ratify the CFE Treaty, Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty. And every time they try to blame Russia, for example, recently there has been a lot of talk about INF, intermediate nuclear forces. Specialists are well aware of what the United States have been doing, their actions that goes against the spirit and letter of this document. For example, as part of creating the global missile defense system, Washington came up with target missiles which are very close to the intermediate range missiles forbidden by the INF Treaty. Also, the drones used by the United States are very close to the description included in the INF Treaty. Also, launchers, which will soon be deployed in Romania and Poland, are also banned by this treaty because they can be used to launch intermediate range missiles. By refusing to admit these facts, our American partners say they have complaints about Russia and its violation of the INF Treaty, but they don't offer any specific facts. Considering these facts and other facts, we cannot limit the current crisis to what happened last year. We think this would be dangerous. We think it's just the culmination of what has been happening in the last 25 years. Our Western partners have been pursuing the policy of preserving their global domination at any cost, expanding to CIS countries, our closest neighbors, countries that have centuries-long ties with Russia, economic, political, all kinds of ties, even family ties. They were faced with a choice: either they go with the West or they're against the West. This is the zero-sum mentality that we thought we wanted to leave in the past. The European Union has opted for confrontation instead of cooperation. We remember the missed opportunity, what Angela Merkel suggested in Baselberg, her initiative about setting up a committee, a EU-Russia committee, for where foreign ministers would work. This idea was supported by Russia, but it was rejected by the European Union. Whereas having such a mechanism would allow us to address current problems and address each other's concerns. As regards Ukraine specifically, unfortunately, at every stage of this crisis, our U.S. partners and European colleagues followed them, took steps that escalated the situation. This happened when the European Union rejected the idea to discuss with Russia the consequences of implementing the economic section of the association agreement. Later, they supported the coup, and prior to that, they supported anti-government riots. This happened again when our Western partners failed to blame people in Kyiv who started what they call an anti-terrorist operation against their own population, spearheaded by nationalist movements. It's hard for us to understand why many of our colleagues failed to apply to Ukraine the principles of internal conflict resolution, which require inclusive political dialogue between antagonists. For example, in Yemen, Mali, South Sudan, our partners always recommend that the government should talk to the opposition, to the rebels, sometimes even to extremist groups. But as far as Ukraine is concerned, they do something different. They justify the use of banned weapons in certain cases. Unfortunately, our Western partners turned a blind eye to everything the Kyiv authorities do, including xenophobia and so on. Let me give you a quote. Ukrainian national socialists regard the Ukrainian nation as a racial entity, and in 3 to 6 months, this matter will be resolved firmly with determination. This is a speech given by the commander of the Azov regiment involved. They're talking about ethnical cleansings in Ukraine, elimination of Russians and Jews, and many other people who are now in the Ukrainian government, including Yarosh Tegnibok and the leader of the Radical Party, Mr. Leshko, who is currently a member of the parliament. There was no reaction from Western capitals to their statements. I don't think Europe can afford to ignore the threat of neo-Nazi tendencies spreading in Europe. The Ukraine crisis cannot be resolved through military means. We saw this last year when the situation on the belt forced the parties to sign the Minsk Accords, and we see this again today when attempts to achieve a military victory failed. Nevertheless, we hear voices from the West encouraging the Ukrainian authorities to militarize the country, send weapons to Ukraine. Such plans can only make the situation worse in Ukraine. Russia will continue pressing for peace. We have been consistently in favor of ceasing hostilities, starting direct talks with Donetsk and Lugansk, and rebuilding the common economic space while maintaining Ukraine's territorial integrity. These are the goals that all the initiatives by Vladimir Putin were addressing, including the Normandy format and yesterday's talks between the leaders of Russia, France, and Germany in the Kremlin. As you know, these talks will continue. We think that there is an opportunity to achieve positive results consult and to coordinate recommendations that will allow the parties to resolve this conflict situation. It is important for everybody to realize how great risks are in this situation. We should not consider each problem separately. We need a comprehensive view. The world is taking a drastic turn today because one era is replacing another. We see growing conflicts around the world. Instead of strategic view, if instead of strategic view, politicians start to take decisions motivated by their short-term goals and their current political situation at home, we'll see more and more dangers evolve. As you remember, in Syria, some emphasized, recommended not paying too much attention to the threat of terrorism, and we all see what happened now. There is a vast territory in the Middle East and Northern Africa that are no longer controlled by legitimate authorities, and extremist groups go to other regions, including Europe. And there is greater risk now of WMD proliferation. The situation in the Middle East settlement and other regional conflicts is becoming more and more dangerous, and there is no strategy to address the situation. I hope that discussion here in Munich today and tomorrow will bring us closer to realization how we can all address this threat, this situation. Of course, it has to be without ultimatums, without threats, working together. It would be much better for us to address this situation if major players would agree about strategic benchmarks in their relations. Recently, the president of the French Academy, Mr. Dancos, whom I greatly respect, said that real Russia cannot exist without Russia. We would like to know if our partners share this point of view, or they want to continue with their policy of dividing Europe and contrasting different parts of Europe, and whether they want to build security together with Russia or against Russia. And of course, our US partners have to answer the same question as well. We have long suggested starting building common economic and cultural space from Lisbon to Vladivostok, based on the principle of indivisible security that would include members of unions and countries that are not members of such unions. And we need reliable mechanisms for the Eurasian Economic Union and the European Union to work together. We welcome support that we see from responsible European leaders for this idea. This year, Russia suggests that the Paris Charter and the Helsinki Act should be reinforced, and the entire Euro-Atlantic region should follow the principles of respecting each other's interests. And we also welcome the group of wise men set up by the OSCE that is supposed to provide some recommendations and help us find consensus. As we mark the anniversary of World War II, we should be aware of the responsibility that lies on all of our shoulders.